Welcome to the Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we on this show do not treat, do not diagnose, but we educate and inform, and we are certainly doing that for you today. We're back for part two with our guest, Joe Allen, author of The Dark Aeon. And this is a must-read book. You need to pick it up. You need to read it. You need to educate yourself. It will impact your life, give you an understanding of what's going on in this new world order that's happening. And it's somewhat scary, I have to tell you. And we all love technology. We use it here. I wouldn't be on the air if it wasn't for technology, but this technology can be used against us, and that's what we're identifying today. So, Joe, on this first part of the show, we ended up talking about Klaus Schwab and World Economic Forum, and there's somebody that I wanted to talk about, and that's Bill Gates and and Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. Can you give us some insight into what goes on with them?
Well, obviously Bill Gates has an enormous footprint across America and across the world. So the things that I focused on the most, you look at the current push to integrate artificial intelligence into the education system in America and across the world, this obsession with creating one-on-one AI tutors. Bill Gates is really behind that. So you can assume that a lot of the funding is going to come through him, and the realization of that model, of this sort of human AI symbiosis model of education, will probably owe a lot of its existence to Bill Gates. The other thing, his role during the pandemic, his role in his foundation's role in both crafting the policy of the response and also in pushing vaccines, which, these were companies that Bill Gates has invested in. The conflict of interest is eyebrow raising enough, but there was one program in particular that bugged me. If we could just talk about that for 1 second.
Just that we use the word bug because he wants us to eat bugs while he eats his prime rib. But
right,
anyway,
the bugs. The nastiest thing that Bill Gates ever proposed, there's a great documentary called Inside Bill's Brain, and the first part is all about his vaccination push. The second part is about his push to bring potable water to Africa. The third is about fusion reactors in China, or nuclear reactors in China. The second part, basically, they create these space-age toilets through Bill Gates Foundation, the Gates Foundation funding. They create these space-age toilets so that people are, using the bathroom into the toilet. It goes through this elaborate processing unit, and then on the other side of the toilet, like I guess, here's the outhouse door, and then the other side is a faucet, and you get your drinking water directly from the toilet. And I'll just never forget seeing Gates. He's surrounded in African villagers and trying to look not awkward and benevolent, and he drinks a glass of poo water. So good. You just imagine 6 months after, the Westerners have left and things kind of, I just imagine that it was a very cruel joke that they were ultimately playing on the Africans there. You don't hear about its success now, and that was 4 years ago. Anyway, with Bill Gates, aside from his creepy persona, aside from all the associations with Jeffrey Epstein and the really bizarre performance he gave on PBS when he was actually confronted about it, I think last year, and when asked if there were any lessons that he learned from associating with a monster like Epstein, he looks at, I can't remember the interviewer's name, he looks at the interviewer and said, well, he died, so you just have to be careful. And you're thinking, what prompted a response like this? It's a very strange way to answer that question.
Yeah.
Anyway, of all the things Bill Gates has done, including, Windows and the kind of monopolization of software that Microsoft represents, there was a program in place. It was this product being developed in the years leading up to the pandemic. It was called the quantum dot tattoo. The quantum dot tattoo was developed by Robert Langer, who is a co-founder of Moderna. He did this in partnership with a woman, Anna Jekyllnik, and both of them are MIT professors, or at least associated with MIT. And they developed this quantum dot tattoo. Basically, the idea is you get vaccinated and then you get a tattoo over top of it. And the quantum dot is basically a QR code. It's a type of plastic, but it has a material that's photoreactive, the quantum element, and that you use a modified smartphone, you scan someone's vaccination record from their quantum dot tattoo is the idea. And they tested it on rats. They found that with lab mice, it lasts for 5 years. So they had this all in place. Langer and his various partners formed Particles for Humanity. I believe that was 2018, 2019, and they're pushing hard to start in the third world. And you're going to tattoo Africans and Indians and perhaps South Americans in order to keep track of the vaccinations that you're also experimenting on them with. And the whole concept, and by the way, the intention, the stated intention from the lab science, the head of the lab at MIT, the stated intention was universal adoption, so that all people would eventually do it. But even if it is just third worlders, the idea of tagging and tracking human beings like that is so horrific and absurd. It's amazing that someone would think it up. Well, Bill Gates hears about it. He takes a personal interest, according to Smithsonian Magazine. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation gives $5 million to the project. And right as the pandemic hit, they were in the phase where they were sending researchers to Kenya, Malawi, Benin, and Bangladesh to survey the populations because they're largely Christian and Muslim. They wanted to find out whether or not they would actually do it because they thought, well, they're going to be freaked out. Oh, this is the mark of the beast, or the kind of correlates, the taboos in Islam. So here you have this guy, Bill Gates, taking a personal interest in not only vaccinating everybody on the planet, but then also tattooing everybody on the planet, and also his involvement in ID 2020, giving everybody on the planet a digital ID. And he was also at the forefront of demonizing people who did not get vaccinated or didn't want a mask, and was very much, if not openly in favor of, had nothing to say about the prospect of segregating people off that were not part of the system. And so it does take a certain leap in imagination to get here, but what you have is a guy who seems to be comfortable tattooing everybody with the mark of the beast in order to buy or sell on the basis of one's biological status. That's a maybe hyperbolic way of putting it, maybe not. Bill Gates ain't a good guy, in my opinion. I am very cautious about throwing good and evil around, because usually good just means I like it and evil means that I don't. But in Bill Gates' case, I think evil might actually be appropriate.
Yeah, on the old Saturday Night Live, which you're probably too young to remember.
Oh, no, I've loved it.
They had Mr. Bill. Oh, no, Mr. Bill.
Yes, of course, Mr. Bill.
Yeah.
It's Monday. Oh, no. Of course.
But anyway, so he's not one of my favorite people either. I have to tell you that. But you wrote this book, The Dark Aeon, and it kind of explains this progression with the World Economic Forum, Klaus Schwab, Bill Gates, and all these other players, Elon Musk, Harari. But the title is Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. That's your subtitle. What is transhumanism? We need a specific definition of that.
So trans, the etymology beyond or across. So transhumanism is beyond human. People have played with the associations, the alliterative associations. So humans in transition towards something else. Humans being transformed, or in the case of Ray Kurzweil, transcending, right? It's a real theme. His book, The Singularity is Near, is about the transcendence of our biology through technology.
So why do they think that we need to do this? What's your impression as to why they think we need to trans?
I think the first element is that most people, most transhumanists or any associated idea that we need to push advanced technology forward as fast as possible and to adopt it as radically as possible. Everything from the brain chips to the nanobots in your bloodstream to AI gods, all that stuff, and of course genetic engineering all the way. One reason is because they don't believe that there is a higher power. They believe this life is the only life. They believe there is no God to save us from ourselves. And they look at human fallibility. They look at fallen man, so full of greed and lust and wrath. and they hope to create technological systems to do the job of a God they don't believe ever existed. I think that's the prime motivation for most.
So we've talked about technology, but there's a difference between technology and artificial intelligence, or what everybody calls AI. What is that difference?
Well, AI is a technology. You could say kind of like the old not all frogs are toads, but all toads are frogs. But AI is really the dividing line, and people place it different place. They put the dividing line different places, from just base computer programming to some dreamt of godlike artificial intelligence system. As you create more and more complex computer algorithms, they do come to resemble more and more forms of human cognition. So visual recognition, speech recognition, handwriting recognition, those were some of the first. Now you have systems that are not only able to recognize speech and handwriting, but able to produce speech and original speech. It may not be superhuman, but ChatGPT can definitely talk.
So, I'll go on YouTube and look at things, and you can always tell that generated speech is there, and you'll hear a talk, and they'll say the word, like, I was looking at a car thing, and it was a Mercury Capri, and so that in one term it was Capri, and then in the next term it was Capri. It's not consistent.
Sure.
And I can cite many examples of that.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Sure.
If you're having a chip in your head that's kind of giving you information, controlling your electricity, because we are electricity. That's what we as beings are. That's how our systems function, through electricity, hormones and chemical changes, and ultimate electricity. Every cell is a positive and negative pole, and we're just movement of ions. That's what we do. If there's a glitch or something like that, you could have a major failure. Do you see AI getting better? Or do you see AI, we program something. You program the computer. The computer is not the machine just doing what you programmed it to do. But with AI, it's developing its own abilities.
That's another place you can draw that border between traditional programming, code-based programming, rules-based programming, and the complex algorithms that we now call AI. And it's narrow AI, just to be clear. It's not like an AI that can think and produce sentences. It can't do complex math, interestingly enough. There are some amazing things, mathematical properties to these systems, but they're not able to do advanced quantum physics, for instance. But in the same way, a language model can't control a robotic system. They're narrow. They're confined to their own domains. But within those domains, much like certain parts of the brain are responsible for understanding speech or putting together a visual picture of the world, the narrow AIs many of them are superhuman. So what was I almost lost the thread there. What was our question? Bring me back, Ed.
Whether
yes,
these flaws.
The threat of idiocracy, of AI-driven idiocracy. I actually think that's probably the most immediate threat, because you have, especially in the accelerationist camps, people who want to push it forward and push forward adoption as quickly as possible, because these systems are improving so quickly. They assume they'll just get better and better and better. But what happens if they don't? Or what happens if they break down? Or what happens if there's one really critical glitch that causes, if not worldwide havoc, worldwide irritation at this ridiculous system that's being imposed? So, no, that's a real threat. Both are. You're talking to someone who has a profoundly negative view of the direction that all of this is going technologically. So, if it is done exactly as they want it to be done, if they create a godlike AI that makes better decisions than human beings, and so therefore human beings should defer to that AI for our decisions, and it's good, it works, it's great, it makes your cities more efficient, people are healthier, people don't fight as much, they don't wonder about things as much. I still see that as a hellish state. I still see that as some sort of bizarre aberration from deep foundational spiritual principles. But the more likely outcome, and I think a very dangerous one, is that it works pretty good most of the time, but not all the time.
Well,
and then you get jammed up, like, as you say, somebody's reckless enough to get a brain-computer interface, and it's whispering, I don't know, dirty Irish limericks into your ear 24/7. You can't stop it.
Well, I love technology. I was before I got my medical degree, I was involved in computer programming. That was my job. I was an early adapter. I remember first cordless phone that my parents got, how fantastic that was. You could walk around the house and talk on the phone, and you didn't have to sit in one place. In my house, I automated everything. Every light I can turn on and off from my cell phone. Open a garage door, open a front door, open a basement door. You name it, I can do it. Even my faucet on my kitchen sink is operated that way. But Wi-Fi, well, now that's not working.
Right.
My printer's not printing because it's not connecting to the Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
Now I'm doing I'm ignoring it all. I spent, Sonos speakers throughout the whole house. Half the time they don't work. And I'm just citing an example. It's irritating.
Yeah.
But what happens if that's all in you? What happens if you have a chip in your hand, a chip in your brain, whatever?
Well, already we see with the mass digitization of every sector of society, but in government, it puts a digital layer between you and any government official that might be accountable to you. Same thing in corporations, the layers upon layers of automated customer service. They seem to be getting thicker. And as much as these customer service bots are getting more and more sophisticated, it's not enough. It ain't good enough. And then half the time when you do get a person, the person leaves much to be desired as well. Education, the same sort of thing. The mass layering of digitization over the student's experience of the literature, over their experience of their professor, the relationship with their teacher. All of these things. So as you see it being injected into every quarter, you also see all of the really irritating, inconvenient, and then in some ways outright damaging, glitchy elements. And I think that's really, really important. But the people who are producing these, selling them, and in the case of governments, mandating them, they can't own up to the ineffectiveness of it. They can't own up to the whether there's there are downsides, or whether there are glitches, or in the case of certain experimental gene therapy injections, whether there may be some serious health consequences that somebody should be held accountable for, right? Maybe even swing on a gallows at some, depending on how bad it is once the evidence comes out.
I could shoot out a name on that one.
Yeah, we've already mentioned one. So anyway, I think that both of those, I oftentimes put it this way. If you think about the Matrix versus Idiocracy, I think that most people fear the Matrix, the idea that super intelligent AI will come alive and enslave everybody. I'm actually worried a lot more about Idiocracy. I'm worried more about going on the time machine, and the machine is misspelled and you just end up on a goofy Disney ride. I think that Idiocracy is already here in many ways, and the more you add automation to it, the more human idiocy is automated, the worse it is, because the machine will just do it over and over and over and over again.
And then it becomes almost like, can you hear me now? So
Yes.
what is the electric anti-farm?
Oh, the electric ant farm. Well, that's exactly what I'm talking about. I've been talking about the mass digitization of society. One of the reasons I used that, though, one of the reasons I used ant farm is because of the kind of eusocial nature of technological collectivization, right? Like, something that's always intrigued me is the social structure of the eusocial creatures, right? Of the ants, the termites, the wasps, the bees. And you have this collectivization, you have this social hierarchy, and many observers have been amazed by this forever, that the larger scale civilizations begin to resemble more and more the division of labor and the large numbers of organisms working towards common goals. These eusocial species of insects, which have been around long before civilization, in some way anticipated the human collectivization. And then you electrify it, you digitize it, and you make possible ever larger ant farms, human ant farms. And, many people have noted too, if you look at especially time-lapse videos of urban behavior, like people in an urban environment, or even just stand in New York City and kind of watch the world go by, there is a very ant-like nature to it, right? It looks like little ants, in streams.
Absolutely.
So we do reflect those behaviors. It's not one-to-one. We do reflect them. So yeah, the electric ant farm is already here, and the more we become technological, even with all of these opportunities for individual expression, oddly enough, ironically enough, the more ant-like we become. And Nikola Tesla actually brought this up. He believed, and I covered this actually in my book, Tesla believed that, and this was in the 1920s, that there would be devices small enough that you could hold in your hand, and you'd be able to speak to someone without wires, and it would be small enough that it could be carried in the vest pocket. Yeah. And this was 1926 in an interview with Collier Weekly. He also, though, and people talk about that like, wow, it's amazing, Tesla predicted smartphones. And actually, some people, the more conspiratorial side of things, believe that he invented smartphones and they're only just leaking them out, but without going down that rabbit hole. The other thing that Tesla predicted, though, was that human civilization would become collectivized. We would become a kind of global brain due to the presence of these widely distributed communication devices, and that we'd be much more akin to the bee. And he even predicted that women would become much more assertive in their behavior because of the equalization made possible by technology, and that the maternal instinct would begin to atrophy and only certain women would actually express it, and that we would more and more resemble the bee out and out, that we would become, in fact, electric beehives. And I think that, with some qualifications, he is correct. He was absolutely correct. We have become a network of superorganisms activated and maintained by digital networks.
Everything's ones or zeros.
Yeah, and if you're in the end, you're a one, and if you're not, you're a zero.
What's a cultural mutant?
Well, we were talking earlier about the evolutionary views of human nature and human society. You've got a biological mutant, right? In evolution, in Darwinian evolution, or any evolution really, a biological mutant represents either the promise of a new, more successful species, or more likely a species that ain't going to make it, or an individual in the species that ain't going to make it. And so mutation is, in Darwinian evolutionary theory, mutation is the driving force of creation. In that theory, though, again, when I was studying when I was studying religion through a scientific lens, one of the more popular ways of looking at religion is through the lens of cultural evolution. And what's the goal is to understand the progress or the changes in society in terms of evolution. And so you're looking at cultural mutants in an evolutionary light. So a good example would be trans children. And that's not, in evolution, there is no positive or negative inherently, right? I'm not saying that, mutant is bad. Or a cultural mutant could be evangelical Christians who wear those promise rings, right? A promise ring, especially with that name, and in those, that's new. It's a mutation. This is something that wasn't there before, and it is now becoming more and more fixed in certain populations, right? And so it's a way, cultural mutation, cultural evolution. I think there's uses to it. I personally don't see it as a paradigm to explain reality in total, but it is a useful way of looking at sudden shifts in the culture and the question of, will they be maintained or will they not? Will they survive? Will they be fit, right? Will this new thing turn out to be an adaptation, or will it end up being a hindrance? And I think that those questions are really important in regard to technology, because as you see rapid adoptions of these profoundly transformative technologies, what you then see are the resultant cultural mutants, And to the extent that your technology determines your phenotypical self, right? Your phenotypical body, your actual physical mutants, and then now that we're actually toying with altering the human genome.
You're speaking of CRISPR?
CRISPR. And
tell us what CRISPR is, please.
Well, just to get to the point that as we're toying with the human genome, we're more and more, we're on the edge of creating actual biological mutants below that. But CRISPR is a way of editing genomes, of editing DNA, and it's much more precise than the previous methods, which employed viruses, plasmids, and other methods like that. CRISPR is really quickly. CRISPR is a component to E. coli. It was part of its immune system. The way it worked in the E. coli bacteria is it would, a virus would be in the E. coli and it would snip the virus. It would identify it with mRNA, and having identified the virus as an intruder, it would snip it and cut it in half. Well, Jennifer Doudna and her team in 2011 found ways to manipulate the CRISPR-Cas9 complex that came out of E. coli, so that then you would have the RNA detector would find whatever gene you were looking for on a genome, and then the kind of snip, the scissors, would cut it out, and you would knock out a gene. And now they've gotten more and more sophisticated. Now, with greater or lesser degrees of success, they've gotten to the point that when they are successful, they can knock out a nucleotide and add a new one, the A, T, C's, and G's, and they can do this quite well. It's not foolproof. None of these things are, but just you see all of these different biological mutant products coming out of the everything from like places like Ginkgo Bioworks to Microsoft. It's based on that precision.
So what that's leading to is designer human.
That's what they hope. I mean, when we talk about transhumanism, when we talk about techno-futurism, all these, this whole thought world, their ideal is to first knock out all the negatives, right? The genes that cause cancer, genes that cause sickle cell anemia, by the way, which is just announced the FDA is right on the verge of approving. And you knock out the negatives, but then the more and more you understand the complex interrelationship between the genes and the body, they hope to begin enhancing humans, more intelligence, more strength, more beauty, all these things.
In order to make better working bees.
And then, well, so that was Charles Galton Darwin, Charles Darwin's grandson, Charles Darwin's grandson, Charles Galton Darwin. That was his view on things. In fact, he also used the bee analogy in the 50s in his book, The Next Million Years, and talked about the possibility of elites actively altering the genotype of the workers to make them more compliant.
Yeah. Interesting, though, as all this technology is building up and things are becoming more robotic, you need less workers.
Yeah.
And then, there's economics, which when we come back from our break, Joe, we're going to talk about digital currency and how that plays into this transhumanism and technology aspect of things. It's time for a break. We'll be back with author Joe Allen, The Dark Aeon. The Dr. Ed Show. I'm Dr. Edmund Sulkowski, and we're here with author Joe Allen, author of Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. We are humans, at least for now, right, Joe?
For now, as long as we can hold out.
Yeah, and I think it's a fight we have ahead of us here. So, Joe, I want to divert a little bit here. Let's talk a little bit about the pandemic, or I've heard it referred to as a plandemic, and that's kind of where I side. But in any case, in your book, you came up with something that I call the 4Ds. You didn't refer to it that way, but explain the 4Ds with the pandemic.
The pandemic was what you could say radicalized me. You saw very early on that a pattern of social re-engineering was occurring. And the four elements that I so cleverly named with the D's, but you immediately had the disconnection. People were completely separated. They were locked in their homes. They were afraid to be around each other. And then
Don't kiss grandma.
Don't kiss grandma. Don't touch grandma. Don't get near her. And so therefore, a lot of elderly people died alone.
Yeah, because what they did in certain states, like the state of Pennsylvania, for example, New York, New Jersey, they took sick people and put them in with elderly, compromised
that's
people.
exactly right.
But then they told you don't touch your grandma.
Yeah, it's infuriating all the way through.
Yeah.
And then from there, distrust, right? Those who bought into the narrative that was being sown, immediately they looked at their neighbors. These people want to kill me. If they don't wear a mask, if they get too close to me, they acted like you were a murderer for your mere proximity. And then on the other side, especially as things kept progressing, especially as it was clear this wasn't going to abate in 6 weeks, those on our side of the camp, more and more, you're like, you people are insane. You're power hungry. You've lost your minds. And so the distrust was mutual, and hence the division, right? The third D. That division, it was already there. We already had a lot of hostility on the basis of politics, on the basis of religion, on the basis of race, on the basis of gender. But the pandemic catalyzed that division, and it was almost, as I describe it in the book, it was like some kind of strange mitosis where instead of two identical cells, it's two completely different daughter cells. And it was already threatening to happen, but it seemed like the pandemic, it almost looked like it was about to pinch off, and we would become at least two, if not multiple, separate societies. And then the fourth, though, is really interesting, and it plays into all of those. Digitization, mass digitization. When you've separated people, they need technology to communicate, and therefore it becomes one of the primary modes, if not the primary modes of socialization through the device. Obviously, Amazon is shipping all your stuff to you. Google is your new god. Are we all going to die next week? Is this ever going to end? All this sort of stuff. Mass digitization, and that was no surprise then that you saw the rollout of the metaverse during the first summer after that, and then the rollout of what, in effect, the Journal of Translational Medicine. There's a really bizarre article in there, widely cited, calling the mRNA vaccine the digital vaccine, that we've entered the era of the digital vaccine. So we had that too. I can explain that in just a second. But maybe more unexpected for me anyway, in the wake of this mass digitization, beginning in January 2023, really, and beginning in Davos, Switzerland, with all the presentations on it, you had the presence of AI was suddenly felt in society. So you've got the metaverse, you've got the digital vaccine, you've got AI. Now, I'm not going to try to weave some sort of sci-fi connection between all of them, other than to say that what we witnessed in the wake of the pandemic, the chapter on the pandemic I entitled "The Pandemic as a Global Initiation Rite," and I think that's exactly what happened in many ways. You see, many people anyway, went into the pandemic as one kind of person, and they came out something very, very different. And some people reverted, a lot of people it stuck. And as a society as a whole, I think it was used, as Klaus Schwab so cynically puts it, it was a narrow window of opportunity to push through a lot of those fourth industrial revolution technologies, from AI to gene-based therapies, to the metaverse, to mass automation. It was a way of pushing that through on a society that was much more suspicious of these things before they were made so enfeebled.
Yeah, I don't think they came out the other end, a lot of people, better human beings.
No.
So early in the conversation, you brought up something, and you mentioned the mark and the tattoo.
Oh, yeah.
So there's something that I don't think there's probably anybody that hasn't heard, the mark of the beast, whatever that is. So, we have cash to buy stuff. You have credit card to buy stuff. So I went into Whole Foods, Amazon-owned company, and I put my credit card in for my purchase, and nothing happened. And I said, to the person there, because I try not to go to the self-checkout, which seems there's a lot of self-checkouts anymore. But there's somebody that had a job that doesn't have a job now. And the whole society works on an economic basis. You're eliminating jobs, you're disrupting the whole system. So I try not to do that. Although honestly, sometimes it's more convenient to self-checkout. But I put my card in. I said to the clerk, "It's not working." She said, "Oh, well, now you have to put your driver's license in, and then you have to put your palm on this reader." And I said, "What? What for?" "Well, then every time you come into the store, all you have to do is put your palm, and you won't have to take your credit card out anymore." Oh, that's a big effort for me to take my wallet out and grab my credit card to put in a reader. I said, "I'm not doing that." "Well, you can use that thing over there." It's like that old thing that they're using. So they're pushing something they called it. I didn't know the name of it at the time. I actually got the name out of your book, Amazon One, and I think that's now in Starbucks, and it's at Panera Bread. I think I saw it there. And to me, that's scary, because I grew up hearing about the mark of the beast, going to church and learning about these things, and it's a mark on your hand. You can't buy or sell. Mark, whether you're rich or poor, whatever, free or slave, mark on your forehead. But they bypass that. You're
the mark.
You're the mark. So tell us a little bit about this.
Yeah, symbolically speaking, I'm amazed that they had the chutzpah to actually push a product like that, especially in a nation that is nominally Christian anyway, in a nation that the consciousness of the mark of the beast, especially in the lead up to the year 2000, was just universal, basically. Anyone who has any cultural literacy knows that the mark of the beast goes on the hand and the forehead. So here you have Amazon pushing for a payment system. And the context in the book of Revelation is that a mark would be given on behalf of the beast. In order to buy or sell, you would have to have the mark, right? So in the lead up to the year 2000, you had 1997 RFID chips that were of human grade were patented, and the information got out and people were freaking out about it. But with most patents, they don't go anywhere. So it was, 2000 came and went. By 2004, you had Verichip, a company called Verichip that was actually putting them out. They were trying to sell them to people. Now you have multiple companies that are doing that, right? But that's an extreme. Even now, 97, so we're talking about almost 30 years. And hardly any people on the planet are chipped. It's just not very appealing unless you have like a real wide techno-fetishist streak. But biometric payment is non-invasive. Biometric payment, which is how that's the basis for Amazon One, it's the whorls of your palm, but also the veins. It actually looks at the unique vein structure of your palm. And so now you don't have to get a chip, but it does all the same things. And in fact, it's perhaps even more invasive in the sense of information. It's now taking biometric readings and it's normalizing constant biometric monitoring, which as it continues to progress, in my opinion, and it's unquestionable, in authoritarian nations, biometric monitoring is already being used to gauge possible insurrectionist behavior, to gauge as a lie detector test, like remember the old polygraphs. That was really, really crude in comparison to the sorts of biometric readings people can get from people in order to ascertain whether they're telling the truth or not. So what I see, there's two real dangers to the normalization of this. Beyond the religious symbolism inherent in the mark of the beast, the two big dangers are this. The more people move towards a culture in which the currency is digital, traceable, and controllable, right? You can turn it on, turn it off.
And that's the key word here, the operative word, controllable.
Yeah. Then you can control the behaviors of the people in your population. And that's why I'm not comfortable, as we talked about earlier, if you have a benevolent group of technocrats in place who really do want the best for humanity. And in fact, I think a lot of the people that we demonize even now, and I can't stand, probably want what's best in their mind for humanity. Even if you have them in place, their ideal is, at least for me, far beyond the sorts of freedom and organic existence I would prefer to live in. So if you have a digital currency in place, those ideals can not only be realized, they will be enforced and easily enforced. Somebody steps out of line, you turn their money off. The other element, though, is that biometric element. That's going to be much more important going forward. And the more biometric information you can get from people, the better able you're going to be, the better able you will be to predict their desires, their emotional states, their weaknesses, the health-related issues, all of those sorts of things. And the two levels with the mass collection of genetics and the advances in behavioral genetics, the more scientists understand that connection between someone's genome, you just take it from a hair off of their head, the more you understand the correlations of their genotype to behavioral profiles, the better able you'll be to manipulate them and control them. But also just the real-time monitoring of physical systems. Your watch, for instance, right? It's very helpful for health purposes, but is it possible to have those health benefits without having either a benevolent dictator using your biological indicators of noncompliance against you, or in the case of a much more vicious dictator of the sorts of Stalin or Hitler?
So that's the hand mark of the beast thing, and then there's the eye mark of the beast thing. If you look at something called clear, when you go to fly somewhere, because they're looking at your pupils.
Yeah, and your face and your head, right? So your head now becomes the mark of the beast too. I think that the mark, to me, the mark of the beast, any attempt to try to locate the mark of the beast in one thing, it seems like a fool's errand to me. I think that just the general motif is enough. It doesn't have to be any particular technology, and the Antichrist doesn't have to be any particular leader. All you have to have is someone who is megalomaniacal enough to attempt to control the entire planet, and all you have to have is a control system in place that if you do not take the mark, right, whatever it is, I don't care if it's on your shoe or on your foot or whatever, if you are not marked for compliance and approval, you can't buy or sell. You can't participate in society. And what we saw during the pandemic is, I think, a preview of the lengths to which that could go if it's not kept in check.
So what is digital currency?
Digital currency is the life's blood of the economy now. People were freaking out about digital currency a long time ago, and they were talking about, all throughout my youth, the dangers of digital currency. And as usual, nobody listened. These people were kind of dismissed as cranks and crackpots. Now, digital currency is really the norm. Your credit card is digital currency. Your debit card is digital currency. Obviously, everything that happens online, cash has become very much marginalized. And so people are like, well, this is way more convenient, and it's much faster. I can keep track of it very easily. Look, there's a little counter right there. It tells me what my balance is. What's the problem? The three problems I just mentioned in regard to if you have a chip in your hand, but you don't need a chip in your hand. If you tap your smartphone or if you just have a card, everything you're doing is traced, meaning that all of your economic behaviors are no longer private and anonymized as they were for all of human history. Now your preferences and your habits are completely exposed, and it's traceable, it's controllable, meaning that you literally, right now it's very, very uncommon in America. It's pretty common in China, but if you debank somebody, you eliminate their ability to participate in the economy like a normal person. And what we saw with the vaxports and things like that, it's kind of associated with the digital identity. You saw that if your biological status if you hadn't updated the software of your immune system, then you couldn't participate in society. So with digital currency, it means that even if you're marked for separation like that, you can't get around it. Like cash, gold, any kind of barter, whatever, those are things that are outside of that net. Whereas within the digital net, the only thing, the closest you have to uncontrollable currency in the digital space is Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies. They could be controllable in the future, but for right now, the decentralized nature of Bitcoin means that it is a digital currency that is less susceptible to that control. But so you have it's traceable, it's controllable, and then I would also argue it's ephemeral, meaning that the reality of the transaction is lost the further and further away you get from the actual good that you were in discussion. The more abstract it becomes, the less and less you see economic interaction in terms of its true value. And so it makes people flaky, basically, so that they spend willy-nilly online, and it makes them easier to manipulate their economic decisions.
And then, we still have cash, although it's getting harder to use. You go to places and they say, we don't take cash.
That's right.
That's legal tender. How do you not take cash?
That's right.
Well, we don't take it.
Yeah, DC is eaten up with it.
That to me is insane. This is cash. I worked for that money, and you don't want to take it from me.
Well, and just imagine you play it forward a little bit, where if you don't use the palm payment system, because here's the problem with it, yet another problem with the cash system. Digital currency, is that with digital currency, the possibility of fraud increases. Somebody gets a hold of your credit card number, they get into your bank account, whatever, they steal your card. And so as the possibility of fraud increases, you have to have different protection measures in place. It's one of the reasons why, for instance, your smartphone, your Apple phone, you take a picture of your face or whatever, you use the facial recognition, that's you, that's biometrically you. It can't be forged. And so hence the appeal of that relationship, that biometric identification with your economic identity, with your government identity, your social identity. It allows you to verify. That's the whole point of Sam Altman's orb, the evil orb, right? WorldCoin, the WorldCoin orb. It's basically like Clear. You take a picture of your iris becomes your wallet. Basically, your iris is connected to a wallet with your digital identity, with your digital currency, and with your biometric identity. So it's you. And the same thing with the flood of bots on the internet. There's a big push to link your biometric identity to your digital identity to prove you're human, to prove you're not a bot. And so as things become more and more unstable and uncertain, the appeal of biometrics will increase. And so just like you were talking about, you go into places all over DC, it happens all the time. No, we don't take cash, sir, sorry. How long before, sorry, we don't take cards, we only take your palm?
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. And it becomes forced on you, and you're going to end up having to accept it.
And that's one of the darkest elements of the evolutionary underpinnings of all this. Because it's one thing when you talk about totalitarian, like a totalitarian leader in terms of social structure, right? It's very simple. That guy is in charge. He's incredibly abusive. He's a control freak. And he is, he's Big Brother, and he has oppressed the rest of us. That's like obvious. But what happens when it doesn't come top down? What happens when it comes bottom up through enticement? And that's, a lot of the evolution and capitalism Darwinian evolution and capitalism have always been very comfortable bedfellows because they operate on very similar principles. The idea of survival of the fittest and so on and so forth. Well, this evolutionary underpinning of the transhumanist point of view, the idea that if you don't evolve, then you will not be fit for the future. You will not adapt, and therefore you will go extinct, or your line will go extinct, blah, blah, blah. It becomes a justification for goading people into an oppressive, or at the very least, undesirable digital system. And they talk about it in terms of a digital ecosystem as if it had, had always been there. And you just simply have to adapt to it and become part of it. But these are human creations, and they are the desires of people like those at the World Economic Forum, like those in Silicon Valley, like those in our military industrial complex, and certainly like those in Wall Street. And that adaptation justification doesn't fly with me.
So that triangle you just mentioned, part of that industrial military complex is DARPA.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about DARPA, because I don't think people, oddly enough, I thought everybody knew about DARPA, because sometimes you think you know about it, everybody knows about it. And I started asking people about DARPA, and I don't know what you're talking about. What is DARPA?
It's been around for decades. I believe it was 1958. It was founded. DARPA is the experimental branch of the Defense Department. So DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. and they just funnel tons and tons of billions of dollars at this point, trillions of dollars into radical experimentation for the purposes of the military. So the internet comes out of DARPA. It was called ARPANET when it was first developed. A lot of what we talk about when we talk about cyborgs and the fusion of human beings and animals with machines, a lot of that both ideologically through weapon systems, right? The fusion of the machine gunner with his machine gun, they kind of become one, or the pilot. That comes out of DARPA. The actual creation of cyborgs, so brain-computer interfaces, almost the vast majority of the early experimentation and a lot of the present experimentation comes from DARPA funding and military contractors. And then your smartphone, the always wonderful for some, but to me the ever menacing smartphone. Most of those components come from the military. The GPS comes out of the military. Cell phone communication comes out of the military. Touch screens come out of the military. Lithium-ion batteries come from the military. Microprocessors come from the military. And Apple basically, this is just a known history. It's not like some secret I'm dropping. It's just not talked about very much. But Apple, for the iPhone, basically took they took advantage of a system which allowed them to take previously patented or now unpatented, or maybe always unpatented. There's a complicated variety, but it allowed them to take all of these previously developed technologies and just simply merge them into one. And that became the iPhone. So the iPhone is in fact a weapon initially, or at least a part of military culture. And I think looking around now, you see the way in which people's brains are literally weaponized against each other by way of social media outrage campaigns or other government propaganda policies and projects. I think that it's pretty appropriate that this digital weapon is now ubiquitous and it's used to weaponize us against each other.
It's insane, actually, when you really think about it. So there's a thing called Sophia, which is such a beautiful name.
Yes, indeed.
But its implications of what it is isn't so beautiful. What is Sophia?
Well, Sophia is in this context, the robot that inspired this image. The name itself, people recognize it a lot of times. In Hebrew, it means wisdom. But Sophia was also the name of the entity in the Gnostic cosmology that, for the Gnostics, the Christian Gnostics, they instead of Eve precipitating the fall was actually precipitated on a cosmic level with this kind of goddess falling away from the eternal light hierarchy, right? So Gnosticism is, I think, really important in many ways now, culturally at the very least. The Matrix, the movie The Matrix, is ultimately a Gnostic movie. It's based on the Gnostic cosmology of an evil demiurge that has created a universe, a kind of false god that's created a universe and trapped souls within it and convinced them that this is the only universe. And so the goal of Gnosticism, and this is very in line with it, the goal of Gnosticism is to break out of this material universe and into the spiritual, because we've been trapped here by this evil god. Well, that's the story of the Matrix, right? This AI has taken over. It's trapped all these human brains in this illusory world, and so you eat the red pill to get out of it. And that's now become a meme, right? Like that's now a cultural touchstone where people talk about if you break through the BS media narratives on this, that, or the other, it means you've taken the red pill. And that's ultimately Gnostic. The literal origin of it is Gnosticism. So Sophia is the name of the Gnostic goddess in that mythos, the ancient mythos from the turn of the millennium, around the appearance of Christ. It's also the name of a robot, the robot Sophia, produced by Hanson Robotics, built in Hong Kong, China, built with the AI produced by Ben Goertzel, with the explicit goal of creating a kind of godlike artificial general intelligence. And people have seen Sophia. The debut was at South by Southwest, like a really trendy hipster tech conference in Austin. And then you had Sophia appearing at the UN just a few months ago. Sophia appeared at the UN to talk about climate change.
And Davos, wasn't Sophia Davos?
Davos, I haven't, maybe. It wouldn't surprise me. I haven't seen it, but it would not surprise me at all. I mean, Sophia has, that's the intriguing part about it, right? It's not like some robot sitting at Chuck E. Cheese playing an instrument and, you know, like, It's like you're talking about a pretty glitchy and not really impressive robot that yet is being held up as a symbol of technological advancement, and is being held up as a symbol in these elite institutions. And that is explicitly what Sophia is about. Her creator, David Hansen, who, a detail in the book, David Hansen named Sophia after the goddess Sophia by way of Philip K. Dick, and the entire point of this robot is to be a symbol for the singularity, the merging of humans and machines. She is an emissary.
The only thing I picture in my head is Battlestar Galactica, machines against humans. That's what the thoughts I have, and that's kind of the battle we have. Here's the book, The Dark Aeon. Joe, where can people pick this book up?
I suggest you go out and get it in person if you possibly can. It's sold at Barnes & Noble and soon to be in various other small bookstores. If not, you can get it directly from the publisher, skyhorsepublishing.com, or if you are acclimated to the beast, you can get it from Amazon. I really hope you will look at Canonic XYZ. Canonic XYZ.
Spell it.
CANONIC.XYZ is the website. They sell only in Bitcoin, but if you are adventurous enough to buy $25 worth of Bitcoin, you can buy it in that, and there's a deep reason behind it. But if not, you can get it from the Amazon Beast. You can find all this at my website, joebot.xyz.
JOEBOT.
JOEBOT.xyz.
XYZ. All right, great. Suggest you get this book. It's an incredible read. Remember, you can hear me live every Saturday morning on AM 1250, The Answer, 9 to 10 a.m. Joe was just reaching me on this past week, and he's been on prior. And you can actually hear those archive radio shows at Rumble, rumble.com, Dr. Ed Show. Search that. And, of course, you want to subscribe, like, and share. Appreciate it. Remember, a healthy pet is a happy pet. When you're healthy, you're happy as well. You know, stay free. That's all I got to say. We have a fight ahead of us, everybody. God bless. We'll talk to you next time. Joe, thanks.
Thank you very much.
A lot of information, man. A lot of